about the objectors? I reckon I know a few of those objectors too.
I know more than just the objectors.
Why isn't that a conflict?
Okay, 7 o'clock yet? Let's tick that. Okay, good evening everyone, ladies and gentlemen, member of the gallery. Can I welcome you all here to tonight's planning meeting. It has approached 7 p.m, the commencement hour for the meeting. Thank you for attending. If you have your mobile phone, if you please switch it off and put it on silent. There are agendas circulated that are on the seats. Please take one and follow proceedings with us. If there's not at the gallery, can you please share with someone, okay? There's no direct dialogue between members of the gallery and council. There are designated speakers who have requested to present tonight, and they'll be caught up when their item is considered. And you're more than welcome to leave at the end of your item if you've come to listen to a particular one. And if you do so, could you please do so quietly? Okay, we'll now commence tonight's meeting. The membership is as listed. We have no apologies for tonight, except for Councillor Greco, who just isn't here for the moment, but he is here for the meeting. Item 3, disclosure of conflicts of interest. Any conflicts of interest from councillors?
No, Mr Mayor.
None to declare.
Councillor
Yes,
Lawrence.
Mr Mayor. I have an indirect conflict of interest to declare in item 5.6, being that I have a direct family member with a property interest within the 200-metre radius of that application.
So would you stay for the item? Or not?
I'll, for the sake of clarity of decision making, Mr Mayor, I'll be not voting and I'll be leaving.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay. Any other conflicts of interest? If not, we'll move on to item 4, confirmation of the minutes of the previous planning committee meeting.
Happy to move.
Move Councillor Williams, second Councillor Cetus. I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? That item is carried. Thank you, councillors. We now go to item 5, consideration of reports, commencing with 5.1, application for planning permit 22 to 24 Olive Street Reservoir. Over to the officers.
Thank you. This application is for the development of 9 dwellings, 6 of which are 3-storey dwellings and 3 are 2-storey dwellings. The application is also seeking to waive the visitors' car space. The application is located in the General Residential Zone Schedule 2, and there are no covenants which affect the site. The application was advertised and 15 objections were received. Those objections are summarised on page 9 of the agenda and responded to on pages 9 through 11 of the agenda. The site is 60 metres from Edward Street, which is the the main strip of the Reservoir Major Activity Centre. It does make efficient use of the site and has limited sensitive interfaces. Those few that it does have, it responds to by setting the building back appropriately. The architecture is contemporary, but it is appropriate in this context, being adjacent to the Major Activity Centre. Although one of the buildings is 3-storey in height, it forms a transition between 2 adjoining 2-storey forms. Therefore, approval is recommended subject to conditions outlined on pages 3 through 7.
Thank you, Kristen. We have no speakers for this matter. Thank you, Darren. Okay, questions from councillors. Any questions? Councillor Greco.
Yeah, I just have a question. Just we're looking at a 3-storey dwelling. I just want to know, are there other 3-storey dwellings in that vicinity there?
There aren't. The 3-storey is within the height limit of the zone, and it's next to an existing 2-storey building on one side and the 2-storey building proposed on the other side. So it forms an allowable transition in height.
Any other questions from councillors? We'll have an explanation here from the officers. If there's no further questions, we have a recommendation. Move Councillor Cetus. We have a seconder.
I'll second it.
Second, Councillor Lawrence. Councillor Cetus, you wish to speak?
Just briefly, Mr Mayor, the site context in which this proposal, I think, draws us, I suppose, to understanding where this development is being sited. Ordinarily, when you hear of such a yield, one might be predisposed to looking at suggesting that perhaps it's a touch too much. But where it's located and relative, I note, for instance, with respect to the aerial photography to the Reservoir Leisure Centre, in a sense, particularly in terms of the transitioning of other developments in and around it, suggesting that a complementary spread of similar built forms have already been occasioned in and around that site. Its proximity to the shopping strip, obviously, there on Edwards is pretty clear, and not a short distance thereafter to Reservoir Station. So all in all, the attributes are there to support it. I suppose a note of concern is always the wavering in relation to the visitor car parking space. But on balance, I think that when you consider the amount of parking that's associated in and around the site, there's timed parking within walking distance, obviously, of the site there, Reservoir Leisure Centre. There's also timed parking in other places. I think on balance it can cater for any overflow requirement, and bearing in mind, of course, that visitation is just that. So the not long-term stays. So the amenity impact in terms of competition for parking on the street is lessened. All in all, in that context, I'm happy to support it.
Thank you, Councillor Setters. Councillor Lyons, a second thing to add?
No, just to note the site context in terms of being right in the heart of Reservoir and in the heart of where the structure plan anticipated greater heights, and yes, I would note our library development nearby, which didn't actually reach the heights that are specified in the structure plan.
No. Okay. Any other speakers? If not, I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? That item is carried. Thank you, councillors. Pardon me, members of the gallery, council decided to issue a notice of decision, technically a permit for that application. All parties will be notified of council's decision to support the officer recommendation. Objectors will be given 21 days of appeal right should they choose to go to VCAT and challenge council decision. Once they get notification, they can exercise that right. Item 5.2 for consideration is 16 Nisbet Street in Reservoir. Over to the officers.
Thank you. This application seeks the construction of 3 dwellings, 2 of them double-storey, 1 single-storey. The land is zoned general residential 2, and there are no restrictive covenants. The application was advertised and 17 objections were received. Those objections are summarised on page 27 of the agenda and responded to on pages 27 through 30 of the agenda. This application is for the construction of 3 modest dwellings. They express traditional architecture and they demonstrate a high degree of compliance with Clause 55. The dwellings are sited in such that they will have limited impact on the amenity of adjoining properties. As a result, approval is recommended subject to conditions outlined on pages 22 through 25 of the agenda.
Thank you very much for that. No speakers for this item, Darren? No speakers. Questions from councillors? Are there any questions?
Just quickly through the chair, you noted it was general residential 2. This is near the growth zones. Is that Klingon Street and Seston Street going to the garden apartment style?
Yes, yeah, it is near the area where.
Oh, okay. So
yeah, it is. Yeah.
Yep. So it's one lot out of the zone.
Yeah, I believe so.
Any other questions? If there's no questions, we have a recommendation. Move Councillor Lee. Do we have a seconder?
I'll second that.
Councillor Lee, do you wish to speak?
It's a reasonably straightforward application. High degree of compliance as noted by officers, and I know there's also a number of similar dwellings nearby as well, so no problem with passing.
Seconder?
Yes, just to note that this is adjacent to an area which the council's identified in C147 to have intensification. It is an area I'm quite familiar with, and development has been very slow based on the dual proposals there. So 3 unit sites are needed so that actually development progresses there.
Thank you, Councillor Lyons. If there's no further debate or comments, I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? That item is carried. Thank you, councillors. Members of the gallery, council has again decided to issue a notice of decision, technically a permit for that matter. All parties will be notified of council's decision. Objectors will also have a 21-day appeal right should they choose to go to the VCAT and challenge council's decision. Item 5.3 is up next is 1C McCartney Street Reservoir, and I draw to council's attention the overhead map. It's that corner building, Cheddar Road. It's been derelict, decaying, decrepit for a long period of time. So you're not familiar with it? I think you are now. Over to the officers.
Thank you. This application is to construct one triple-storey dwelling. It is located in the general residential zone, Schedule 2. There is no covenant which affects the land. The application was advertised and 13 objections were received. Those objections are summarised on page 43 of the agenda and responded to on pages 44 through 45. This is an unusual site with a triangular shape, which was part of a unit development. The Chair has already pointed out the dwelling was only ever partially constructed. This application seeks to reconstruct and to complete that particular dwelling. This design deals well with this constrained site, providing reasonable on-site amenity, and its location ensures that surrounding dwellings are not affected. Approval is recommended subject to condition outlined on pages 40 through 41 of the agenda.
Thank you, Kristen. Questions from councillors? Councillor Sevis.
I've seen this building almost fall apart, Mr Mayor, if I can take it one step further. Is it possible to get some officer feedback in terms of its structural integrity?
I think most of it's actually been removed. If you've seen it recently, there's not much left there. There's not much left.
Been out.
Question?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. You've answered the question accurately. Through our municipal building surveyor some 6 months ago, we sought an engineer's certificate. After a few windy days, we were concerned about the structural integrity. It appeared that some of the timber framing had decayed, and that action was successful, and it's all part of the structure. That was at risk to the public. That was suitably removed within a number of weeks after that procedure was followed.
Good. Thank you, Darren. Any other questions from Councillor? Councillor Lee.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Just interested to read the page 47 of the report, where it obviously it's a very difficult site, granted, but 99.2% site coverage and permeability of 0.8%. Can we just get some explanation about the Series 2 non-adherences to that, please?
It really does talk to the specific nature of the site and the fact that because this particular lot was previously part of a slightly bigger triangular site that had a 3-unit development on it, that meant that this resultant site is highly constrained, and the previous approval had a very high site coverage over that particular part of the lot as it was, and I think that given where it is in terms of its proximity to the Reservoir Activity Centre, the fact that it is completely separated from any neighbouring residential properties means that the higher site coverage and the like can be contemplated, because it really is quite a unique site.
Yes, to say the least.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Villela.
Just through you, Mr Mayor, to the officers. The original application was 3-storey?
Yeah, it was for that corner property.
Yeah, so even though one's been removed because it was structurally unsound or whatever, it's the original application that was approved was for 3-storey?
Yeah, it was.
Just one quick question. I note on this application that the open space would be basically a 3rd floor. I just want to better understand how that will actually work.
In what respect?
Sorry?
In what respect? So it will be a roof, like a roof deck or a terrace, for want of a better term.
So it'll be an open terrace?
Yeah.
With no roofing?
No, it won't be. It won't be roofed. It'll be open, and obviously it'll have balustrading, but it won't have any screening because it's not within 9 metres of any sort of sensitive interface.
So a flat roof structure.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. Terrace.
Okay, there's no further questions. There's a recommendation there. Someone to move the recommendation. Move Councillor Lee. Second, Councillor Villela. Councillor Lee, need to add?
Look, just knock down the ugly side and put something more habitable in there. That's all I can say.
Concur. Okay, I'll put that to a vote.
I think the people of Reservoir will welcome me.
All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you, councillors. Members of the gallery, council decided to issue a notice of decision, technically a permit for that site. Finally, after so many years, all parties will be notified of council's decision, and objectors will be given 21 days of appeal should they choose to go to VCAT once they receive council notification. Next item is 5.4, application for planning permit 748 to 750 Plenty Road Reservoir. Over to the officers.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This application seeks approval to construct a 4-storey residential building. As detailed in the officer's report, it includes 30 dwellings, which comprise 20 single bedrooms and 10 by 2-bedroom apartments. There are a total of 30 car parking spaces, so a waiver is sought for 6 visitor spaces. The full quotas provided for each of the residential dwellings, however. The land has an area of 1,084 square metres, so it includes 2 current titles. As detailed in the officer's report, the height and setback requirements for this site have been assessed against Amendment C137, which is adopted, so the 30-degree setback applies, and that's remained throughout, Mr Mayor, from exhibition to adoption. So there's been a 4-storey mandatory limit. The site has also been a 30-degree rear setback proposed at exhibition and adopted by council. Subject to a condition which is recommended in the report, Mr Mayor, which removes lift overrun. There's a few conditions in there that deal with that. It would bring the development into compliance with the 30-degree requirement. So the officer's report is recommending support. It also takes on board and discusses for the benefit of the Planning Committee a recent VCAT hearing and concludes that what is in C137 that applies to this site can be seriously entertained and used as a guide in deciding on this particular application.
Thank you, Darren. Speakers for this item?
Yes, Mr Mayor. I have Antoinette Latouf of
Plenty, a reservoir, yep. Antoinette, are you here? Yes? No? Would you like to join us at the front here, please? Yeah, please, by all means, yes. There are 2 seats there. Just join us over here. You've got 5 minutes to present, and keep your eye on the screen. Just take your time. Okay, if you need a glass of water, there it is there for you.
So my name's Antoinette. So I've been living in the area for over 20 years now. So there's a rest of apartments that are going to be next door to me. So there's going to be overshadowing issues. The parking already there is not good at all. My driveway is already always blocked. I can't get out of the driveway. There's traffic issues, accidents that occur there often, privacy issues. The noise is also the issue. I read all your counter arguments on the application, and I know noise is only short term, but for young families, a short term 6 months needs a long time for us. It seems like there's only 2-bedroom properties and 1-bedroom properties, so young families or families in general are moving out of the area because of this. So we can't afford to stay in the area. We have to move out of Darabin because now there's one block that's going to be 4 stories on the corner, so there's 3 houses in between. There's going to be another 4-story block. There's what happens to the 3 houses in between 2 major developments, and also there's 1 house next door to the 4 stories. So in that short block, that there's going to be probably an extra maybe 120 people that live in a small area, which I'm not sure how council is going to actually address that issue, let alone the setbacks. They don't meet current standards. Apparently the area of coverage already is going to be 80%, which apparently it's only meant to be 60%. The height is meant to be 9 metres, and then the development is going to be 15.6 metres. So there's all that. And I think overall the area is actually not ready for it.
It's the main area of Plenty Road, which is a major street area going both ways, and there's clearways in the morning, there's clearways in the afternoon. How's all that going to be accommodated? You've also got the construction of this underway, and how's that going to be accommodated? It's going to affect people's driveway coming in, entering and exiting, and just all of those issues that, how are they going to be accommodated? When is the tram coming and going to the same area? If there's trucks entering and exiting that area to build such a large apartment block, is that going to affect the trams and the whole system for school and from school? How is that all going to be addressed?
And also 2 blocks at the same time, how is that going to be addressed? two major developments in one short period of time. That's like we've got. There's a few questions. I'm not sure where.
Just a presentation.
Yeah.
We ask the questions.
Yeah. So it's mainly the traffic, the privacy issues. People going to be in their balconies looking over us. There'll be probably little parties in the balconies. I think there's going to be balconies on the front and the side, so it's going to affect directly opposite and the side and probably the back. They're all single stories along. Probably a few metres of that street is all single stories. There's no double stories in that area. There's no probably apartment blocks in that area.
Yeah, I was going to raise where it's at least, I guess, apartment block that's 4 stories in the same vicinity. That we at least compare that to an old down Fanny Road, and I can't find anything. There's something on the corner with the old license bus like Mr. Bean. I think that's 2 stories, and that, you know, that's quite high, and that seems like 4 stories to affecting neighbours right on. You look up and you look out, you're going to be able to look into their backyard and vice versa, maybe solar powers, and as well as, I guess, the buildings and residents behind as well.
And also the garden top from, like, there's going to be 4 stories, then a garden top. So what happens to people that are going to be gardening on the top? They can see all around 360 view from there. I guess you need to take into consideration the people that actually live in the area. These are going to continue, a lot of people, elderly people live in the area or young families live in the area. I actually brought that property 2 years ago purposely to be next to my family to actually help me and me help them. So if this occurs, we're all going to be driven out of the area.
I actually inquired about just anonymously went in, I believe, 8 months ago, and asked about, you know, could I inquire about mine, and I was like, yes, we have a permit, yes, you can provide a deposit, and that's misleading information. So
2 years ago they started selling these
20 seconds.
yeah, so to tax effectively, if they don't have a permit and you don't, it's illegal.
It's been happening for over 2 years.
Okay, thank you very much. If you can resume your place in the gallery. We now go to questions from councillors to our officers. Councillor McCarthy.
Just a point of clarification. I see that the 30-degree setback has been applied. If we can just get clarification, I note the requirement to remove lift access to the roof. So was that also removing the lift overrun as well? That wasn't sort of clear to me.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, the lift is to terminate in the for the top level, and it's to remove that structure that's at the rear that you can see that quite obviously protrudes through the current 30-degree requirement, which is shown on the plans. So the idea is to remove that structure away, and there's just a stairwell.
Okay. So it would present, if I'm correct, it will present then as a 4-storey, not a 4 and a little 4.5.
Yeah, the conditions requiring that lift overrun not be inside the 30-degree. And there are a few areas where there's a marginal encroachment.
Yep.
There's a condition requiring those to be brought into compliance.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Glover.
Just through you, Mr. Mayor, to the officers, are there any other buildings that are 4-storey in that area?
Not that are built. There's certainly there's an application planning committee considered not far from here on the other side of the road. There are also applications in opposite Summerhill Shopping Centre, and certainly in and around the Tyler Street precinct 425. Plenty Road was a decision at VCAP recently to refuse an application that was 5.
Thank you. And just a supplementary question, if I may, Mr. Mayor. The General Residential Zone Schedule 3, does that talk about incremental increase? Or
Mr. Mayor, the General Residential Zone 3 is just a caretaker zone until Amendment C137 is put in place. What happened when the new zones translated, Darwin zones changed to General Residential 1 and 2 primarily. Council was out to exhibition advertising C136 and C137, and that's why along those 2 corridors you get this residue zone with the General Residential Zone 3. That's there until such time, and it's basically the same as the old Residential 1 zone, so it translates to the General Residential Zone 2. It's due to translate over to the Residential Growth Zone in this case, when Amendment C137 is approved by the Minister for Planning.
Supplementary question, if I may, Mr. Mayor. So, as we're assessing it at this point in time, do that amendment hasn't gone through yet. So, do we assess it as a general residential zone Schedule 3, or is it where it's going to be down the track? But right now, in this point in time, that amendment hasn't gone through.
Mr. Mayor, no, the amendment hasn't gone through, but we've spent a bit of time in the report explaining that VCAT made a recent decision on 425 Plenty Road, and that provided some direction.
What was that decision? Can you explain it?
That decision said that where there's alignment in policy direction through a planning scheme amendment from exhibition to adoption, so in this case 4 stories to 4 stories, that the tribunal would be guided to be informed by Amendment C137.
That's clear.
So we would say in terms of height setback, that's your primary guidance. When we get to details like detailed amenity impacts, then you're informed by clause 55 of the planning scheme.
Councillor Williams first.
I'd just like to ask a question regarding which would impact visitor parking. We seem to have a church just in Robb Street here, the Holy Name Church. Now, I believe that there is some sort of limited times also in Robb Street and Plenty Road regarding parking. Can you clarify what those times are? Because I do believe that a majority of church people do park in Plenty Road, and also kids pick up time. So I just want to know when those clear times are and when no standing are.
Page 60.
Mr. Mayor, the clearways apply in the traffic cycle, so on the inbound lanes to the city it's morning.
Is that 9 or 8 in the morning? Sorry.
Through till 9.
Up till 9 o'clock,
yeah.
Yep.
And then in the evenings, it's from 4 till 6:30.
Any other questions? Councillor Lee.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just revisiting C137, because I think that's the third issue here. As far as I can tell, the height and the setbacks and the 30-degree angle are compliant with what's, and consistently so with 137 throughout the exhibition and possible adoption process, as from what I'm seeing here. The issue I have is really in relation to site coverage, permeability, building height and street setback. They do not comply to the standard, but comply to the objective. So can I just get some explanation about the non-compliance with the standard and its relationship with C137?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, there's certainly been some comment in the report about this and where you might exceed those requirements. This site is a high change area in Council's housing strategy. The housing strategy has informed Amendment C137, which recommends that this area, as adopted by Council, is 4 stories mandatory under the residential growth zone. Explaining that strategy, that provides a departure point where there is a clear direction to have more intense development, and that's where you can look at through the design and development overlay in Amendment C137. There is a closer setback that is encouraged in the design and development overlay. So that aspect seriously entertained, that was the same all the way through. It also leads you to a greater site coverage, because in the design and development overlay it's encouraging apartment typologies up to 4 stories. But to achieve a reasonable setback in transition, a 30 degrees is required, so that there's due respect given to the properties remaining within the general residential zone to the rear, so there's a reasonable setback.
Yep. Councillor Williams.
I'd like to put in an alternative motion.
Any other questions?
I had my hand up, sorry, before. Look, it's just one reservation I would express, and I just would like some comfort from officers in relation to how the car stackers that are proposed, how the sound, given what's taking place with other car stackers, will impact on adjoining properties. If we can just get an idea about what sort of acoustic buffers or requirements are in place to deal with the sound component of the car stackers, given the noise that some systems can create for adjoining property owners.
Mr Mayor, they're required to comply with the SEP, so there's certainly, that's the noise regulation statewide. In this case, the car parking is within a basement, so that helps reduce the impacts of noise. It is a single basement construction, and the stackers have obviously been used to avoid the prospect of two basement levels.
Any other questions? Councillor Greco.
I had a question in relation to housing diversity. I note that there's 2/3 of the dwellings are going to be one-bedroom dwellings, and the one-third is going to be two-bedroom dwellings. I just want to know how that stacks up against our planning scheme, given that there is such a high proportion of one-bedroom dwellings. And this is a question that was raised, I think, by the objectors in regards to whilst it is an apartment development type site, but how that keeps in relation to the neighbourhood character of the area.
Mr Mayor, this is covered in the Darebin housing strategy. There's certainly, and what it suggests is that the people, the type of people moving to Darebin and their housing requirements, the greatest demand is for 2-bedroom dwellings. The one bedroom dwelling typology is encouraged under the housing strategy because it provides an affordable entry option for many aspiring homeowners in the city of Darebin. This council prides itself on promoting housing affordability and accessibility to affordable housing. Providing that typology provides that sort of price entry point. And it is part of a total response. We'll be presenting later in other proposals the planning committee will consider there will be 3-bedroom dwellings, but we don't actually have a specific policy direction that precludes development if it's not providing 3-bedroom dwellings. That's still required, but the greatest need that the data and the evidence suggests is for an addition to the 1 and 2-bedroom dwelling stock in the city of Darebin.
Thanks, Dale. Any other questions from councillors? If not, we have a recommendation.
As I said, I'm happy to put an alternative recommendation.
Let's hear it, Councillor Williams.
The alternative recommendation that council refuse the application with grounds as follow. Number 1, the proposal does not respect the neighbourhood character of the area. 2, the proposed development is not considered to be generally energy efficient and does not comply with standard B10 energy efficiency at clause 55.03-5 of the Darebin planning scheme. 3, the proposed does not provide adequate side and rear setbacks to the adjoining residential properties. The proposal fails to comply with standard B17 side and rear setbacks at clause 55.04-1 of the Darebin Planning Scheme Act and fails to comply with the proposed design and development overlay of the DD017 under the amendment of C137. The proposed is 4, the proposal is an overdevelopment. 5, no visitor car parking is provided contrary to the clause of 52.06 car parking of the Darebin Planning Scheme.
Thank you. Second.
A bit of second.
Councillor Bello, seconded. Councillor Williams, do you want to second it?
I believe there are a number of issues. 1, there's no other building of this scale in the area. I believe it's definitely an overdevelopment for its particular site. You've got the primary school in Rob Street and the church, so there's definitely restrictions regarding parking in the area. In reference to energy efficient, that just explains itself, and it really doesn't fit in with the neighbourhood in the Plenty Road area there.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Vole, anything to add?
Look, I think even though, we understand this is a growth area, there's trams there and access to public transport, etc., and we've allowed for 4 stories, even within that, there has to be, there are some limitations. And as Councillor Williams has noted, this is even stretching our own planning scheme in terms of the setbacks and all that. In addition to that, I think and I've said it before and I'll say it again, when we waiver visitor car parking in this area, there will be a cumulative effect We won't feel it necessarily at the impact today, but we will feel it in, you know, a year, 2, 3 years' time. So and car stackers, I'm not a huge fan. And I actually think this particular, and the actual sizes of the units, I know we can't do much about that, but they're actually really small and boxy. So I don't think that it's responsible, affordable housing entry for people. We are looking at one bedroom boxes, which I think it's more like student housing rather than, you know, diverse housing for residents of Darebin. I think this falls short of a responsible planning for all the issues identified by Councillor Williams. If we're going to have intensification in that area, we really need to be vigilant that it's quality design and that it does meet the needs of the diversity or diverse of Darebin, including respecting the people who already live in that area. This falls short and they need to go back to the drawing board.
Councillor Lee.
Look, I feel compelled to speak against the alternate motion, and I do so very reluctantly. It was less than 12 months ago, September last year, as a matter of fact, when this council adopted C137, which is currently under consideration by the Minister. Under that proposal, some parts of Plenty Road were actually had their height increased from 4 to 6 stories.
Yes.
And had their setbacks increased from 30 degrees to 45 degrees. That was actually adopted by this council. So to have something that comes in well below and well fit in with what council has adopted, I think we are making a mockery of the process if we not stick to our adopted processes. At the point in time, I didn't agree with the 4-storey height. I didn't agree with the 45-degree setback. I argued for a 30-degree setback, but the will of the council at that time was 4 to 6 stories along Plenty Road and 30 degrees and 45 degrees. So this is an area that this council has agreed to adopt a 4-storey form with a 30-degree setback. So I just ask council to think very carefully about this. If the council has already agreed to a process and we're now backtracking on it, what does it say about our standing and our reputation to the state government and to the residents in general?
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Greco.
Yeah, look, I'm speaking in favour of the recommendation. Look, I don't think there's any dispute about the C137. I mean, I was a big advocate of getting that down to 4 stories. So there's no dispute about that. That yes, it does fit in that envelope. We agree with that. But I think we have to go back to the point about, and this is the point that Councillor Villela raised, is about the quality of that development. I really got grave concerns about the question that I raised, in that 2/3 of this development is going to be 1-bedroom apartments, and 10 of the 30 dwellings are going to be 2-bedroom apartments. I've got grave concerns about that. I've got no concern about, you know, that it's within the envelope, and I think that's okay. But we need to look beyond that and look at the quality of the design and the quality of the development, and to ensure that we provide real housing diversity in areas that traditionally, where we've seen single dwellings on those large properties, and that where we maintain a diversity of housing to enable both also 3-storey housing, so that in that unit type development, that apartment type development, we also can get families in there with 3-bedroom apartments. That's not the case in this situation here. So on that basis, I'm not willing to support this particular application, even though it does fit within the window that we've created under Amendment 137. But again, we have to look within that and look at the quality of the design.
Do I have a right of reply?
Not yet. There's any other speakers for or against? Councillor McCarthy.
Look, I actually just have a question, and just in relation to something Councillor Greco raised there, if we can just get an answer which will affect how I vote on this. At any stage in the process, did officers advocate for an increase in, a provision of 3-bedroom apartments within that building? Because that's what the market's pushing 1 and 2. The owners are pushing 1 and 2 because of the yield, but have we advocated what Councillor Greco has proposed at any stage in the process? given these processes take about 12 months at least, has it been on the table?
Have a crack at that, because yes.
Mr Mayor, look, I don't honestly know the answer to that, and all I can say is it would be unusual that we would be strongly advocating 1, 2 and 3 bedrooms for, it's still a relatively small development.
I think for 3 bedders you actually got to provide additional car spots, so they would have taken that into account when considering this application. Anyway, Councillor Williams, if there's no further debate, you may close with your remarks.
Look, when I look at an application, I see it as that...
Just a point of order.
Nothing new. No, nothing new. Sorry?
Do alternate motions have a right of reply?
Yeah, she can close the debate. Right. But it's nothing new. You've got to rebuke what's been discussed.
Well, I was not here in September last year when we actually endorsed the C137. I was interstate with my family, so I did not vote on that particular night. But I am here being vocal and being a voice here tonight, and I don't feel it's appropriate, and I don't believe that it's appropriate for those living around it and those who are going to be living in it, especially when you've got the local school nearby and the church. It will have a huge impact on them.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Williams. That closes the debate. Now we're voting for a refusal for this application. All those voting for the alternative for refusal, please raise your hands. Those against? Carried. Council has decided to refuse that application based on the grounds provided by Councillor Williams, and all parties were notified of Council's decision. The applicant will be given 60 days of appeal rights should they choose to go to VCAT to challenge Council's decision. Council will now go into VCAT. Should we go? No, you're finished. And affirm Council's refusal, and all objectors will be notified of Council's decision.
Can I call a division, please?
You may call division. All those in favour of the refusal, please stand up. I name Councillor Williams, Cedas, Villela, Greco, Lawrence. Those against? Councillor Lee, McCarthy, Fontana, Walsh. Thank you, councillors. Next item we're considering is 5.5, 96 to 98 Strathmerton Street in Reservoir.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This application seeks approval to change the use of a shop to a neighbour.
Thank you for the moment. We'll just wait for the members of the gallery to vacate the chambers. Thank you, Darren. Take it away.
It enables the sale of packaged liquor. It also forms part of a convenience business, which doesn't require a planning permit. It's important to note that this application involves an existing premises moving a few doors down. Business is currently located at 90 Strathmerton Street. The report sets out that the sale of packaged liquor is associated with the convenience premises, and the licence area is approximately half of the total premise area. The application has been advertised. There have been 7 objections received. These are listed on page 83 of the officer's report, and there's a response on pages 83 and 84. The objections relate to social impacts, noise and traffic issues. The officer's report assesses the application against practice note 61, and this takes the committee, Mr Mayor, through a range of considerations which I think provide a thorough assessment of the application. As detailed on page 87 of the officer's report, the existing business enjoys a 5-star rating on the Victorian Liquor and Gaming website. And it was also reference the application sent to the Victoria Police, who have not raised any concerns regarding the conduct of the current business. With that, the application is recommended for support.
Thank you very much, Darren. We have speakers for this item.
Yes, we do, Mr Mayor. I have the applicant, Chi Nguyen, and I also have an objector listed, who's Spiro Kazic.
Okay. Chi, if you're here, if you can take the front there, sir. Thank you very much. You've got 5 minutes to present your case, and we'll take your time.
Mr Mayor, councillors, never been into this situation before, so I'd just like to address some of the issues that the plaintiff raised. With Noel here, he suggested the liquor shops together, the existing premises is going to double and triple in size. Eventually, running a business, I would like that to happen, but at the moment that's not happening. Parking issues for the business, we're closing one business down to merge into one. So I don't think that's going to double or triple in size anytime soon. You also mentioned the shop is within 10 metres of the corner of a T intersection, and that makes it partially dangerous and accidental prone. But the business that's at 96 Strathmorden Street is an existing convenience store, and with parking and customers moving in and out of those parking bays for years, no issues there. It's also raised damages and vandalism to his gas pipes and property. Occasionally people throwing bottles and throwing into the area of the gas pipes, and he writes might damage and possibly create safety hazard. It's been there for approximately over 6 years, and I haven't had any fire brigade or any gas leak or any gas problems that had to be shut down in the area because bottles being thrown at his gas pipe or whatnot. And it will be pretty hard for anyone to damage any of those things because there's a 3 metre high fence surrounding that area. Other concerns with noise issues, our opening hours are 10 o'clock in the morning to 8 o'clock at night, from Monday to Saturday, and 10 o'clock to 7 o'clock on Sundays. So we're not open very late at all. There's another issue from the same family member. The same family member is that he often goes to bed early and likes to sleep peacefully at night. My answer to that is I would like Mr. Casby to sleep peacefully at night and all the residents around my shop. But at the end of the day, my closing hours are 8 p.m. Other complaints put up were pretty much parking, safety, noise. With safety, there hasn't been any violent actions towards the shop or to the surrounding area that I know of. I am again a 5-star rating with the liquor licensing authority. I get a discount on my liquor licensing. And with parking, I don't think there's much of an issue, because if there was, council wouldn't add in 2 garden beds to add trees into the car space in front of our shops. And with vandalism, it happens everywhere, but nothing in my windows, the neighbours, the shopping strip, none of those vandalism has occurred, so pretty much all I have to say.
Thank you very much. You can resume your seat in the gallery. We now have an objector who's asked to speak. Is that right, Darren?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Spiro Kazic.
Spiro, if you can join us at the front here, please. Thank you. And you've also got 5 minutes.
I live in Unit 178 Orongo Avenue, right on the intersection of St. Martin and Orang Avenue, next to proposed bottle shop. There is an opening between proposed bottle shop and my unit, where 7 gas meters are located and 4 water meters. Now people throw bottles down there, sometimes broken bottles. I regularly clean them. The gate's not allowed to be locked because of regulation of gas people and water people. So I can shut the gate, but you cannot not allowed to lock it. Now, about 2.5 months ago, the road's been modified. They put 2 little islands on it with the signs. Signs been banned and already changed once. There's been 2 accidents in the last 2 months already on that intersection. Last night, on that intersection, Housing Commission burned down, and police, put it off, police been there all night last night and today, mining the place down there. It's probably suspicious. Now, I live there, all these things will happen 10 metres from where I live. This place is not safe as it is. With the bottle shop, it will be a lot worse. That is my my complaint about bottle shop out there. Here, bottle shop is a little bit further up. A few shops further down straight, not right on the section. Before they modified the road, there was parking spots there. Now, it's all parking spots. They'll probably finish up with the double parking, or I don't know what they'll do. But anyway, it's very, very dangerous position down there. Now, this guy here, after he finishes work, he goes home. I got to stay there and then pull up with all the trouble, yelling, screaming, and threatening to kill each other. Now, I think I'm entitled to have peace, bit of a peace. I want to have a peace, but bit of a peace anyway. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, I'm Steve's brother, and I'm part owner of the residence at which he lives. And what you really need to do is, I don't know whether any of you know the seriousness of the situation there. It's the corner. Do any of you know exactly where this location is? It is extremely, I mean extremely dangerous. I've worked there many days during the development of our building there. The cars fly around there. As Steve pointed out, the signs on the islands there have been knocked out twice in the last few months already. Now this proposed bottle shop is going to be right on the corner there, adjacent to residential, which is where Steve lives, and on the other side it's all commercial, so they are all shops. Now I just think it's unfair at the moment. The bottle shop exists in a spot where it's surrounded by other commercial buildings and shops. Now they're going to bring it onto a very dangerous corner adjacent to residential buildings. Furthermore, the area which Steve mentioned where the gas and water meters are, it's right between the our residential building and where the proposed bottle shop is going to be. It would be dangerous if someone were to throw a bottle there at one of those gas meters. There are 7 gas meters in a row, 1,000 metre high. Now that is a potentially hazardous situation. So we feel that with congestion of people going to the bottle shop there, and they frequently would drink outside or hang around that area and throw a bottle right there, right at the gas meters. That they are their main objections, but mostly the danger to other people around there. If there are going to be more people going in and out of that bottle shop from the Housing Commission area there,
15 seconds.
From that Housing Commission area there, it's a potentially extremely dangerous safety hazard for other people.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. You can resume your seats in the gallery. In the gallery. Questions from councillors. Councillor Villella.
Just through you, Mr Mayor, to the officers, are we aware of the public safety issues in that area? I know it's not a planning issue though, is it really? Or do those public safety issues affect planning? I suppose there's 2 questions there.
Councillor Villella, I think we need to focus on the actual application. It's a separate matter altogether, unfortunately.
It is separate. I'm just trying to figure out whether, or has there been any consideration? It's just separate, is it?
Mr Mayor, there's some comment in the report just about the social issues and social considerations. And that's where we rely on the Liquor Licensing Commission through their star rating scheme. And really the only things that can be considered in that context, in the planning context, is the astuteness of the business. And there's a separate process outside the planning process where that's really scrutinised, where the proprietors scrutinised on whether they are capable of conducting the business above and beyond the expectations.
Councillor Lee?
Yes, thank you. Just draw on that liquor licensing aspect of things a little bit further. So issues such as antisocial behaviour and so forth are assessed under the liquor licensing regulations. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr Mayor. Primarily where the conduct of patrons and the business's management of those patrons, that's where that process is examined.
Yeah, and just to follow up, if I may, Mr Mayor, the applicant mentioned something about a 5-star rated applicant. Is that where is that in relative to the scheme of things?
That's, as the applicant said, that's the top level. So that's basically no issues. And one of the things we do too as a courtesy to residents and objectors that are interested in the application, we also notify the Victoria Police and seek comment if they're aware of any issues that might be attributable to the business. And the advice is there are none.
Okay. Any other questions? Councillor McCarthy.
Just want a point of clarification. It is referred to in the report under page 57. My understanding is it is an offence to open packaged liquor in a street unless it's a designated area and within certain requirements. Can we just get confirmation that that rule would apply in this commercial strip?
Mr Mayor, I'm not sure of that, whether it applies in this particular. I know it does to our central business area locations. What I can say is that the entire area is in the commercial 1 zone. I'm unsure whether that requirement applies in this case.
I just would, if I can just draw Mr Rudd's attention to the top of page 87. The question is asked, are there any local laws regulating consumption of liquor in public places or public spaces? And the response is local laws prohibit of an open container of alcohol in the area. So I'm just wanting to just ensure that that is accurate information that we've got in here, because I am aware that we have no alcohol zones in some locations, Preston Market and other locations, and Reservoir Station. But I just wasn't sure if that same, if this is correct in that sense, because I know that you can open alcohol in a park under certain requirements and restrictions, but.
Yeah, sorry, I mean, the report does say it applies to the area, but whether that's across the road or in the general vicinity of the site, I'm unsure. But certainly out front of the premises, that's what the report says.
And just a subsequent one, I suppose, whether under the Victorian liquor and gambling regulation process, whether those issues around the likelihood of alcohol being consumed in close proximity to the outlet in this case, whether that is part of their consideration. If we can just get clarity, if we are aware of that, whether they do that assessment to see how likely that is and how that's managed by the proprietor. Because that's.
Yeah, Mr Mayor, look, I'm unsure what their manage. All I can say is what they look at in the general issues, and they do look at responsible service of alcohol. But beyond that, it's really difficult for me to comment whether they, whether that business is responsible for people
technically not really relevant, but anyway. Any other questions from councillors? Councillor Villala.
Mr Mayor, it's not a question to the officers, but because of the, the liquor licence and that process, and there obviously are some concerns raised by the objector around safety, traffic. I'm just wondering if it's appropriate, Mr Mayor, to, after following the planning committee meeting, if maybe we have a discussion with the residents to sit down and look at
I think that's these separate matters that council needs to address in another forum, but not here.
No, not here, but just to make it clear that there are 2 separate issues and maybe 3.
Yep, Mr CEO?
Yeah, councillors, Mayor, quite often police will ask to make it easier for them to enforce, to council to have a local law in an area that can apply anywhere. Council can come up with that makes police to give a PIN notice immediately, even though there are provisions. When they sell, they are complying with not open sale, open the bottle and sale, or within certain limits. I don't know exactly how many meters that people cannot consume, but police have difficulty enforcing that. So they will come and ask for council. We have councils do that. Certain areas designated as that open bottles cannot be carried or consumed.
Yeah, but I'm talking generally, just to hear the concerns the residents have outside of planning, because there seem to be a number of concerns that are not related to planning per se, which I think we need to follow up.
In another forum.
Yeah, in another forum.
Yeah, just on that point, if I could just ask for some clarification and for some direction, just in relation to the recommendation, it has certain notations there. Would it be possible that one of the notations takes into account the points that have been raised around safety, around those issues, that it is noted, so like that we can give some assurance if this was to go through, give some assurance to the objectors that those points will actually be specifically looked at either by council or any other authority. Can we note that as a notation in the recommendation?
I think that's your discretion, Mr. Mayor.
What are we noting?
For notation, but there's not a...
But again, it can't really form part of the
plan. No, condition.
Got to relate to what's regulatory or controllable through a planning scheme. But if there's a direction separate to that,
like I said, it's another forum to be discussed.
Councillor McCarthy.
Well, look, it's just to that point, I'm just conscious that we're getting straying into areas that are not part of our consideration. If I can just set clarity though, from what I can understand here, we're talking about the relocation of an operation that is in that current strip. So any issues that are being raised about the appropriateness or use of alcohol in that precinct, you would expect we'd be looking at the substantive or current practice rather than future. That's not an issue that can, as far as I understand, affect our planning considerations on technical grounds, although it does go to a small part of the planning consideration, which is the appropriateness of the application in relation to council's own planning scheme. I can't see anything here at the moment in relation to that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. It's a comment more than a question, I think.
Yep.
Yes. If there's no further questions, we have a recommendation.
Just to comment, just before we go to the recommendation, I would note reading the report, it doesn't mention licensed premises north of here and east of here, but anyway. Look, I'm happy to move the recommendation.
Councillor Lawrence has moved, there was a seconder.
Happy to second it, Mr.
Councillor Lawrence.
Look, I understand the distress that the residents feel regarding this, because it is a mixed site. It's got residential development and commercial development. But in terms of the permit alone, it is a relocation of an existing business, existing condition, and I don't know that there's planning grounds for us to reject that. Now, having said that, I was one of the councils who sponsored the alcohol-free laws some years back at Central Preston and at Edward Street, Central Reservoir, and that was in response to antisocial behaviour that was going on. So,
can you speak to the topic?
Yep. So those matters have to be dealt with through local laws, not planning. So I do take on board the antisocial behaviours, and I will be monitoring it closer than probably anyone, and take that up in another forum of council.
So I'm assuming you have delegated authority.
More than anyone.
Looking forward to the infringement notices you'll push on.
Goes through that.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Councillor Malala, as seconder.
Look, I think there are limitations to this. Is a planning application, planning permit for, and so we haven't got really grounds to refuse this. Do take on board the antisocial and the concerns that the objectors have. We need to discuss them with the residents and look at the other options. But as far as the planning permit goes for this particular application, there's no grounds for us in which to deny it. So, but I want to pursue the other issues in an appropriate forum because they're very serious. Thank you,
There's
Mr.
no
Mayor.
further debate or comments from councillors. I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? That's carried. Members of the gallery, council decided to issue a permit for that, notice of decision for the application. All parties have been notified of council's decision to grant a permit. All objectors have been also notified in relation to their right of appeal should they choose to go to VCAT. And in relation to that other social issues, council will look at that in another forum and attempt to address and work through those. Thank you, members of the gallery who have come to that item. Next one we're looking at is item 5.6, application for planning permit for 139141 Normanby Avenue, where we're being asked here to form a view. So over to the officers, can we hear some history about this one, please?
Mr Mayor, Mr Chair, I'll just declare, restate an indirect interest in that a family member owns a property within the 200-metre radius of this application and indicate that I'll not be voting and I'll be leaving the chamber.
Thank you for that, Councillor Lawrence, if you can lead that.
I think they're arguing.
Yes.
I think someone needs to go out there.
Thank you, Darren. Over to you.
This report seeks a resolution, as you said, Mr Mayor, for the committee to form a view in relation to amended plans that have been lodged at VCAT, following an appeal against the council failing to make a decision. The lodgement of the appeal followed concerns being raised by officers in regard to a previous scheme. So rather than address the concerns raised during the term in which council was considering the application, the applicant saw fit to lodge an appeal against council failing to make a decision. Be that as it may, the proposal before us is an amended set of plans that arrived earlier this month. Again, I apologise, Mr Mayor, it doesn't give council or objectors a great deal of time in which to consider the matters before us. The revised set of plans proposes 11 double-storey dwellings. It includes 2 single-bedroom dwellings, 6 two-bedroom dwellings and 3 three-bedroom dwellings. There are a total of 15 car parking spaces provided. They are provided in the accordance of the planning scheme for each of the dwellings, and there's a single visitor parking bay also proposed. 9 of the 11 dwellings will provide open space in the form of a reverse living arrangement with a balcony accessible to living areas located on the first floor. 2 of the dwellings are proposed to have a more conventional open space at ground floor. The site overall, Mr Mayor, is quite large. It's 1,126 square metres, so the size of 2 equivalent house blocks. As a result of the application being advertised through the VCAT process, there are a total of 10 parties that have lodged a statement of grounds. Of those 10, 4 have elected to appear and make a submission before VCAT. The amended plans have been assessed and are considered an improvement on the earlier versions that Council was dealing with. The application before you and the plans before the committee are recommended for support, but subject to a number of conditions to address a number of minor matters. In particular, Mr Mayor, I know there's some concern about car stackers, and I agree it is unusual that you see them used in a townhouse typology. There are a number of concerns that residents have raised that have been attempted to be addressed by conditions. That is to enclose the parking area to reduce the incidence of noise, and also to ask for some acoustic testing to ensure there is compliance with the state environment policy. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Darren. And we have speakers for this item.
Yes, Mr Mayor. We have 3 objectors that have listed to speak. That's Michelle, Steve and Jeff.
Okay, if you speakers want to present, you've got 1 minute and 40 seconds each, a total of 5 combined, or you can work out amongst yourselves as to who the main speakers will be. I'm assuming we've got Michelle here and Jeff, is that correct? Thank you. Please take a seat there. So there'll be 2 speakers only, is that correct? Yep. Steve, do you want to speak as well? Okay, so you've got 1 minute 40 seconds, so keep an eye on the clock and we'll stop when you get to 1:40.
I have
that.
got written notes.
Yes, you can circulate those if you like, by all means.
Thank you.
Your time starts now.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, councillors. Notification has been sent to the planning unit that I'll be speaking on behalf of Jeff and Ursula Surace, Christopher McLean, Tony Molino, and Steve Umit, who will also speak. Apologies for my preparation. I was only made aware of the meeting this morning. I am objecting on the grounds that this proposal is overdevelopment. The revised plans still represent significant overdevelopment of this site with poor internal amenity of the apartments, including reverse living arrangements. I feel there's excessive site coverage, lack of landscaping opportunities. The need to install a mechanical car parking system via car stackers is a symptom of this overdevelopment. The waste management proposal, which is alongside Leinster Grove, is directly adjacent to Jeff and Ursula's front door. There's also issues in regards to overlooking and overshadowing for both 137 Steve Umit's residence and Jeff and Ursula's place at 58A Normanby Avenue, where they'll lose light into their north-facing first-storey windows.
20 seconds.
The notes are summarised there. So, inappropriate poor design response, no consideration of the proximity to Mayor Park, unsatisfactory provisions for parking, which are all outlined there, an unacceptable negative impact on the on-street parking, traffic flow, pedestrian and cyclist safety, and I don't feel that car stackers are an appropriate response to parking in this location.
Okay, thank you. Into minute 40, so we can have the next speaker. Sorry for that, running on 5 minutes between, so...
I'm sorry for all our unpreparedness.
No, please.
We were only notified about this morning. We were not given an invitation to this prior. So, first of all, my name is Jeff Strachey. We are the double-storey townhouse on Leinster Grove that is going to be aligned with the back end of the new dwelling. I'm in no way, I'm actually, okay, we're all for, new proposals coming on board as long as it's not overdeveloped in a way that this place will be. Car spaces are at a limit already without the new dwellings coming on board. On Leinster Grove, there's a sporting track over the road. Please drive by on a Saturday or a Sunday and see the lack of parking we have as owner-occupiers of our places. There's nowhere to park. If someone comes to visit, they have to either park further down on Normanby Avenue or even down on Shaftesbury Parade if they can get a spot. Our north-facing windows, that was one of the reasons why we purchased this particular townhouse. With the new construction coming on board, they will be overshadowed. We have a courtyard towards the back of our place, and again, that will be also overshadowed. And one last thing before I go, the right-of-way that is the back of our garages, that is not a right-of-way. That is a driveway. We pay body corporate on this. This is private property.
Thank you for that. Okay. So, if Steve, if you want to join us, and last speaker too. Thanks, Steve. Your time starts now.
Okay. My concern is if you all have a look at the east elevation, we have unit 3 and 4. It's almost, I can't read this because I haven't got glasses here, but approximately 7 metre high. So I have a courtyard right next to that. So I lost my son. I lost the view of the park. At the moment I can see the trees, I can see the sun, I can see the sunset. But if this development go ahead, I have no sun. That clearly shows on the next page on your shadow line. There is a shadow right throughout the day, especially in the summer months. Concern 1. Concern 2. The setback has changed. The street scope has changed because of this development. Number 3. You have a community centre, you have a park there. Now, 5 days a week, there's not car park in the street at all. So you're saying to me you're going to build 11 units, you're going to provide one visitor's car park, and they're all going to take their turns to visit one visitor at a time? I don't think so. So I think it's overdeveloped, way too big. So if this development go ahead, I'll be looking at 4 windows. I spent a lot of time in that courtyard. I have trees, that means there will be no sun. I think it's too high and it's overdeveloped. It should be reduced. That property was originally the number 39, number 41 original was a 3-unit site. Now we're going to 5.5 unit site.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve. Okay. Over to Council now to ask questions. Councillor McCarthy.
Look, I've got an alternative, but before I move that, I just wanted to just get clarification from our officers in relation to the comment by the second objector in relation to the driveway that's referred to as a right-of-way. If we can just get clarification in terms of the officers' assessment, do we have any information about that? The right-of-way referred to in the plans, which was told to us by the objector as actually a driveway. Can we get some clarification into that, please?
Mr Mayor, my understanding is it's a right-of-way and there's multiple properties that have got right of access over that piece of land. One of the things that this development's doing, it's actually setting the garage or carport access off, so in essence you end up with almost 6 metres from the neighbouring wall. One of the challenges with the site response here is that the boundary to one of the objectors' site is actually right on the right-of-way.
So just to be clear, just because I'm seeing heads shaking as we say that it's a right-of-way, do we have any clarity in relation to because it would seem to be a property title issue if there's some dispute about who it is, and therefore that may affect how Planning Committee considers this. I do have an alternative to refuse, but I would like to be clear on whether there's other design faults at play here in terms of access and egress from the site. Sorry to put you on the spot. I just a new point that's come to us. I think it's an important one.
Mr. Rudd will clarify that.
Yeah, I'm happy to read the existing points of the motion while Mr. Rudd is looking at that, if that helps councillors.
Let's hear the alternative.
Yep, and then councillors can consider if they want to second it. The alternative is that council issue a notice of refusal with grounds as follows. 1. The height and form of the development will result in visual bulk impacts and will be detrimental to the character of the area and the amenity of the public and private realm. 2. The proposal provides insufficient storage facilities. 3. Open space areas offer poor amenity in terms of areas, dimensions and solar access and are insufficient to meet the reasonable recreation needs of residents. 4. The proposal is an overdevelopment of the site. And 5. Insufficient visitor car parking is proposed.
Happy to second.
Second, Councillor Williams. Darren, have you got anything?
Mr Mayor, I've got a copy of the title here. It's unambiguously labelled road. So, and the title is quite recent. So, when a planning application is lodged, it needs to be less than 3 months old.
Okay, so I have to take the officer's view on this in relation to the technicalities. Otherwise, I would have considered a further point, but I'll move that. I think I've got a seconder here as well.
Councillor Williams to second the alternative recommendation. Alternative form of review to refuse. Councillor McCarthy, you wish to speak?
I'll keep it brief. I think that the key thing here, and this is in some respects an extraordinary, but also not actually that extraordinary, given the sorts of things that come across Planning Committee's view from time to time, application, and the circumstances through which it's come to us this evening are disappointing because the applicant hasn't allowed Planning Committee to consider it in its substantive process and has instead gone to VCAT, and as we've heard, has allowed us very little time for an appropriate and reasonable consideration of what's proposed. And so whilst that's an act of, I would consider, bad faith, we need to deal with the technicalities. And I think on technical grounds, there's a lot of faults in this application, and I don't think we should be supporting it as we go to VCAT, which is where this is heading. I don't think I can recall a time when a car stacker regime has been proposed in this sort of development, and I think that's a dead giveaway that there's something horribly wrong with the amount that is being proposed to cram onto this site. While I appreciate that there is the need for well-designed, diverse housing stock in this location, and I know it extremely well, this is not it, and this is not what we're looking for when we look at appropriate housing in this location. You just have to look at the Leinster Grove section there, and to see the pressure on parking in that section with the soccer games, the cricket games, a lot of use around Mayor Park now. It is an extremely popular park, but of course not only that, you've got a lot of demand on on-street parking in both that street and adjoining streets, and so to think that the site can accommodate any extra visitors, I think is extremely problematic given the demand on on-street parking there. So any increase in dwellings to these sites needs to be done very carefully and with consideration for those matters. There are some technical grounds, I've mentioned them here: insufficient storage facilities, obviously the visual bulk impacts on adjoining properties, but the complete, what I think, disregard for a better design response is probably the most disappointing thing in the process that's led us to get here. So I'll end it there, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Carthy. Second, I wish to add anything?
Look, just, it does concern me that there's no visitor car parking. When we have insufficient car parking, we have what's called a domino effect that affects everybody in the street. It's definitely an excessive overdevelopment of the site, especially when you're talking about appropriate setbacks. I believe that the sensitive interface at 139 Normandy Avenue is going to be really exposed here, and I don't believe that there's been sufficient enough setbacks to give better protection for that sensitive interface.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Yes, ma'am. Councillor Walsh.
Yeah, I'd like to speak in favour of the alternate recommendation.
Sweet.
I'll just be brief, but I think it is unfortunate that the application has to go straight to VCAT. My big issue with this is I've got many issues with it. I think it is an overdevelopment, particularly on a street like Normandy Avenue, which if you look at the traffic, does get congested at the best of times. But a big issue for me is the car stacker part of the application. I have my doubts as to whether it will work, and I worry about the impacts that it would have in a location such as this, and so that's why I'm going to be supporting the alternate recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh. Councillor Seeders.
Just a couple of quick points, Mr Mayor. I think not too surprising in some respects, given the earlier rendition, when you look at between 52 and 58 Leinster Grove, they were built now going on 10 years ago, Mr Mayor, as you will be aware. All of them are reversible. So there's the template for the subject sites. But it's clearly also an opportunistic development in as much as picking up on the earlier theme as addressed in those developments, but also it attempts quite clearly to live off borrowed amenity. So we've got a park, ergo why do you need to provide on-site open space? So I get the gist. But in terms of the actual congestion that we know quite well on the Avenue, and particularly at this intersection with Leinster, It'll be interesting what VCAT's attitude will be, particularly in terms of the site response between access and egress to the site. In this instance, we have 2 subject properties attempting to support 11. So I think we shouldn't lose sight of that arithmetic. So is it the one that's further inset to the streetscape that's going to be a consideration for VCAT in terms of the high density threshold, or will it be the one that wraps around into Leinster Grove? The last point I'd make, just before my time is up, is also with respect to the access and egress points towards the right-of-way. I think the setback that we saw with the earlier developments, Mr Mayor, was designed to create an easier movement. But whether Castex can support that in addition to it, I don't think so. And it's interesting that they've chosen that particular way of addressing parking, considering the relatively small-scale development when we normally see that treatment for larger apartment buildings. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, councillors. If there's no further debate, I'll put that to a vote. The council goes to VCAT to form a view of not supporting the amended plans, therefore a refusal. All those in favour? Carried unanimously.
We have that noted.
Yes. Council will now go to VCAT and form the view of not supporting the amended plans which the applicant has lodged. And I understand that you people will be parties to that appeal as well. So council will now go there with the view of not supporting the amended plans. Thank you. Can we ask Councillor Lawrence to come back in? That concludes item 5, our reports. We now go to item 6, other business 6.1 and 6.2. Any questions there from councillors?
Happy to move.
I have to wait for Councillor Lawrence to come back if he hasn't already left the building.
No.
Those of you who want to leave may do so. We're about to conclude tonight's meeting very soon.
It's not in the, sorry, Mr Mayor. Got it.
All right. Any questions on 6.1 or 6.2? Councillor Lee.
It's not in the actual agenda, but I've just been notified of a 12-storey, possible 12-storey development on 36 to 46 High Street. So if office can provide some comments on that in the Friday bulletin, that'd be great. It's not part of the agenda.
Okay, yep. Any other questions? Councillor Walsh.
Yeah, look, I've noticed that there's no, through you, Mr Mayor, and to our, I guess, to Mr Wright and maybe to Mr Baird as well, where I've noticed there's an normal list of the applications which are coming up next council meeting. I haven't noticed that in the agenda this week.
Would you have a list of items for next council meeting, Darren?
Next planning committee meeting.
It's on page.
Yeah, it's not page numbered. Mr Mayor, if I can assist, I can read out the items. 33 Joffrey Street Reservoir.
What page? All right. If you give the page, that would do.
Yeah.
Page 115. Is that right? No.
Yeah.
Any other issues, Mr Mayor? I propose to move them on block.
I move Councillor Seaver, second Councillor Williams. I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you, councillors.
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Okay, thank you, members of the gallery. That concludes tonight's meeting. Thank you for attending.
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
After you complete your agenda items for next week, please, councillors, are in your pigeonholes. Next week's full council meeting.
No, sorry.
Yeah, it's a bad run, isn't it?
It's one of the ones we